I feel like whether I say Studio Ghibli or Studio Ghibli, somebody's gonna want to correct me. So I'm just gonna stick with what we say over here in Japan, Studio Ghibli.
国の内外問わずアメリカ軍の動きは各地で慌ただしくなっておりまして、報復作戦の規模はかなり大掛かりなものになる可能性が高いことが推察されます。
2001 is 25 years ago now. Wow. Though I actually don't think all that much has changed. Compared with how different 2001 was from the late 70s, culture hasn't shifted much. And in some ways, that's a bad thing, but hey, we're still getting wonderful Studio Ghibli works, even today, so there's a degree of comfort in some things not changing too much. 千と千尋の神隠し, meaning the spiriting away of Sen and Chihiro, known in English simply as Spirited Away, was in that year Miyazaki Hayao's follow-up to the stunning fantasy masterpiece Mononoke Hime from 1997. Ghibli had also released Takahata Isao's much more playful and silly movie Hōhokikyo Tonari no Yamada-kun in 1999, but by that stage it was firmly established that Takahata would be releasing peculiar artsy films with a more niche appeal, while Miyazaki's had more mainstream narratives and concepts, while retaining the auteur's touch that had made Mononoke Hime and the much gentler Tonari no Totoro impactful and gained a substantial following both in Japan and around the world. Sen to Chihiro was a success on a new scale, however. It was a monumental hit here in Japan, the highest grossing movie of all time in the Japanese box office, a record that went unbroken for 19 years until it was finally beaten by the Kimetsu no Yaiba movie Mugen Resha Hen in 2020. It was also a big breakthrough for the studio in the West, being honored by the Oscar for Best Animated Film, though it's probably worth remembering that Gong had only been established the year before, where it was won by the great work of art that is... somebody! Yes, good old Shrek. This would remain the only anime movie to win the plaudit until Miyazaki got his second nod for Kimitachi wa Dou Ikiru ka, or to use its English title, The Boy and the Heron. Though I'd argue Takahata, Hosoda Mamoru, and Shinkai Makoto should probably have also been recognized, but the Academy is just the Academy, let's not forget that. And it's always been worth noting that there were no Pixar films in the year that Sen to Chihiro won. Everyone still loved Pixar in the early 2000s. Now, Miyazaki had already shown incredible range in his artistic output, from the ponderous and surreal interwar story of a world-weary pilot pig, Porco Rosso, to the bright, nostalgic whimsy of Majo no Takubin, or Kiki's Delivery Service as it got retitled in English. Miyazaki would announce his retirement after Mononoke Hime, but for the first of many, many, many times, decided to come back for just one more movie. Though in fairness, Kondo Yoshifumi, who's the director who was slated to take over from Miyazaki, had sadly passed away after directing just one movie, the superb Mimi wo Sumaseba, or Whisper of the Heart, which came out in 1995. Sen to Chihiro was intended to fill a perceived gap in Miyazaki's oeuvre for a serious narrative tale for 10-year-old girls, a decidedly younger demographic than the dark and sometimes brutal Mononoke Hime. Wolves are scary. By depicting a young, somewhat needy girl ripped away from the safety of her parents and lost in a world of yokai, of Japanese spirits, having to become independent, though still having some guidance from the kind-hearted around her, ends up creating a fairly bewildering and unsettling experience, like the strangest parts of Alice in Wonderland, and in many ways tonally similar to Labyrinth. When I first saw it, it was actually the films of Jean-Pierre Jeunet I thought of, like La Cité des Enfants Perdus. And indeed, that first viewing has stuck with me over the years. I'm so glad I saw it first on the big screen. That one shot of Yubaba blowing her top and running at the screen is burned into my memory as one of the most stunning pieces of animation I've ever seen, taking me completely by surprise at the time. The impact of her filling up that entire silver screen in her fury and showmanship has few equals. Yubaba is one of the film's many incredible and iconic creations. This complex, not necessarily evil, but certainly antagonistic, Margaret Thatcher puppet matriarch, whose sense of gaudy opulence offsets the traditional Japanese aesthetic all around her, but who has a classic yokai sense of fair play, and deeply loves her son. Sen herself is so believably a kid, which is something so difficult to get right in this sort of movie, and having the then 13-year-old Hiiraki Irumi voice her helped so much with an authentic performance. Her delivery is sometimes surprisingly soft and reedy, and sometimes it's impressively headstrong. But at every point it comes over as authentic and perfectly pitched for the moment. This doesn't always work out, getting an actual kid to voice a kid character. As weekly anime Assassin de Aru no Ste Tasuka Yusha Yorimo Akiraka ni Tsuyoi no da ga recently found out. But here, maybe with the leeway of feature film recording rather than the rush of a weekly show, it was clearly the right decision. Then there's Haku, who is just beautiful, like all of Ghibli's youths are beautiful. Still in that time-honored world masterpiece theater character design style, but with that silly rich boy bob haircut that I find so bizarrely adorable on anime characters. Step forward, Toya Akira. The strange and awkward romance that develops between this lost little girl and the dragon spirit of a river is pleasingly weird and undeniably cute. And then there's this whole plethora of weird and wonderful minor characters, from Kaonashi to Kamaji in the boiler room, level-headed mentor figure Rin, and, 3 bearded Daruma-san-ish heads that bounce around, making just the perfect noise for heads that bounce around. That's just what heads that bounce around should sound like, The way total weirdness is just treated as mundane is so compelling. I love it. And hey, these guys are super cute too. Look at the little birdies. Now, much has been made, narratively, of the stillness going into the third act, the end of the chaos giving way to the quietness of a train ride. It's strange how something so small speaks of narrative sophistication and an eschewing of the rules that make so much of what we watch so formulaic. And then there's the tiny little touch of Chihiro still wearing the hairband that she got from Zeniba, casting doubt on the Occam's razor assumption that this was all a dream, in an incredibly tiny and subtle touch that most will miss on their first viewing. It's not the most sophisticated animated movie of all time, but it certainly has an impressive level of sophistication that elevates it. I don't think even the people who like to hate on it because, popular thing bad, are gonna deny that. I love千と千尋の神隠し, and I have from the moment I saw it. But that said, it's actually far from my favorite Studio Ghibli movie. And actually, overall, I prefer Takahata sensei to Miyazaki sensei, when their full careers are considered. Well, so far, in Miyazaki's case at least. And this isn't even my favorite Miyazaki movie, which is, and always will be, Mononoke Hime. Certainly, I think Hisaishi Joe has done better soundtracks too. But千と千尋is undeniably special, and especially significant to the history of animation, given how it propelled Miyazaki and Ghibli from well-known anime creators beloved in Japan and in foreign circles that liked the still niche hobby of watching anime in 2002, to household name beloved the world over. There are some pros and some cons to this renown, in a balance that may become slanted the more hipster you feel about liking Ghibli, but the art is what truly matters. And in my view, we are all so fortunate we get to experience movies as beautiful, as moving, and as occasionally unsettling as this one. That's all for today. See you guys again next time.